So I have tried numerous times to get the 1689 chapter 3 section 3 um, to live stream download and then record it. Just I've tried everything. I've used a different method because for some reason the videos are coming up completely not there. And then this last one, they only showed 22 seconds of about 45 minutes. So I had to redo it again. I think that was the third. Yeah, it was the third time I've attempted to put the 1689 chapter 3 on God's decree in there, but I'm still waiting on this one to download. It says it's sending, so we'll see. Um, I had some pretty cool conversations. There was a conversation about secular school, and of course, I think everybody knows my position on homeschool is where it's at. I mean, insofar as parents that are, really wanting to educate. I'll give you an example. Somebody said something to me the other day about, it was the way they framed it up. I guess you might say the way they sounded it was as a person that has been homeschooled. So I like to tell people I'm a product of Roman school, because I did go to public school, secular school. Every year since I was 4 until the age of 12, 13-ish, I was sent down to my granddaddy's farming ranch in Lane, Atoka. We got up, checked fences around 4:30, came back, ate breakfast. There wasn't anything major to attend to outside. Then we started homeschool. Homeschool usually started with scripture in the King James only. And we learned proper English, spelling, just how to read contextually. Punctuations before, what they meant to the context of what we were reading. And we also, obviously, in the working world, when you have to use your hands, one of these is a pretty incredible tool. My granddad had an interesting way of teaching, the measurements. But I'm going to tell you what the secular world taught me. I'm going to tell you what the secular world taught me. The secular world taught me that there are 16 sixteenths in an ounce, that there are 8 balls in an ounce, that there are 4 quarters in an ounce, that there are 2 halves in an ounce. I didn't get that from my stepdad. I'm going to tell you what the secular world did. The secular world brought humor to it in such a way that I couldn't forget it, because I was a product of Roman schools. I was. Everything that I learned insofar as how to maintain 150 acres with all kinds of animals, and vegetation was pretty significant. I mean, it literally is the only thing that I can really look back on and have truly comfortable memories. You know, just watching my grandfather and my grandmother uh, interact, um, and just how they functioned as husband and wife. Um, and, you know, when it come to teaching us reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling, English, I mean, even whenever it come to science, uh, we actually had to go outside and do the things that were necessary to produce vegetation and then maintain it. I remember there used to be winters, like you had the whole summer, then you had like a fall break, winter break, and a spring break. And of course, I would sit down there during those times also. And again, homeschooled, like this is just how they were raised. And so when they've got children there, at least when I was there, um, that's how they were training me. And golly, man, I just honestly, man, that was for me, that was the life. You know what I mean? Like I remember grandmama actually, she had um, family relatives and then friends, whatever. On their crops, they might have been growing beans, and we might have had, I don't know, okra or something. You know what I mean? And so we would just load up these big, um, I don't know, like burlap baskets, um, and we would just trade stuff. And that barter system is one of the ways that we stay fed. And if you know what the neighbors here are growing and they know what you're growing, well, then y'all make uh, uh, negotiations on what bartering looks like. Um, the the money that comes from the sales of produce and meat and eggs and things like that um, was usually put up for some of the expenses insofar as electricity, property tax, running water, um, those kind of things. I do remember we had a well out there, and I know that water used to come in there really really cold, and but at some point in time I think there was something that was done when I got older. It was changed and all that, but we had pond, and we would have folks down the street. We'd go catch fish, bring all them fish back, and then we'd put them in Granddad's pond. That's how we stocked pond. And so um, the life that we lived on that farm, I only left that farm um, when it was more or less time to go to the post office or something like that to pay a bill, or to put some petrol in the vehicles, or in our jugs. Um, but my whole life, man, that whole life experience on Granddad's farm and ranch, it beats anything that I learned from a secular society. It does, and You know, it's kind of like the person the other day that was, you know, chopping it up with me. You know, having uh, been homeschooled, I just thought to myself, I didn't say it, you know, I wasn't trying to argue, I was just trying to understand their point, so it wasn't necessary for me to try to control a narrative. They're trying to do that, they want to do that, that's fine. I just wanted to know uh, what their position was. I know what mine is. I went to public school and I was homeschooled. When homeschool let out, the day or the week that homeschool or the public school let out, I was immediately sent to my granddaddy's farm and ranch, and I stayed down there the whole summer. I didn't get back to start public school um, until the week public school started. So school for me, at least until I was a teenager, um, it was year round. That never ended. But I can tell you right now, the things that I learned insofar as what was necessary to maintain a farm and ranch, honestly, those are. I mean, I like to weld. I'm glad I learned everything in welding, and I think it's just fantabulous. But I remember Granddad had uh, um, a welder, and we would load that Jeep up. We'd take that thing out to where he had um, the corners. Usually, your corner fences is where you got a little bit of welding to do sometimes. But um, I don't know that he. I don't know that he had any schooling on. I mean, heck, he was born. Well, I know he lived during the Great Depression, so I don't know what Votex they had during that time frame, but we learned how to do that. And this right here, I don't know how long these guys have been around, but we always had one of these. And also, people make fun of me because I carry these around. I don't care if I'm wearing a suit and tie. I don't feel comfortable without my pliers, and it's not just because I was a welder, but because on the farm, pliers are, you know, like it's where you can get leverage on things that, you know, you might have incredible grip strength, right? But whatever you're holding could either rip the skin off or poke you or stab, whatever, man. And these suckers right here, they don't just pull biscuit pans out of the hot oven. But these things right here, you just have a pair on you. Just take a month. Just go a month and see what you can do with a pair of pliers. It'll open your eyes up to some things. But you know, of course, we're not teaching that in public schools. Public schools, you want to go to school to get a good grade, so that you can get a good job, so that you can work for someone else until you're dead. That's what secular schools do. Prussia is a wasteland, an industrial wasteland. It just sucked the marrow out of life. It's the same educational ideology as we have, at least here in America or Oklahoma. We have the 47th. Where number 47 is not taking mental health serious enough. We would just put them in prison and do away with the mental health facilities, because that's where they're gonna just spend the rest of their life. Recidivism and things like that. It's the cash crop. They, you know, for the most part, have gotten rid of cows and replaced them with humans. And then, insofar as education is concerned, we have lowered our standards to the point that we are number 49. So, like, you have, I believe Alabama and Oklahoma are both in far as the worst mental health, corruption systems, and the education systems. But in Oklahoma, um, we just want a person to have a GED so that they can get a job. And if they can get a job, then we can get them in debt. And especially with our schools. You ever notice how our school systems, the college school systems, are all about debt? They put, huge federal dollars into colleges to teach people stuff you ain't never going to use. I mean, honestly, the people that go to college to get a degree in the medical field, not even 10% of them end up doctors. They end up, managers at stores or teachers in public schools. And it's it's really good at putting a person in debt, so that what ends up happening is there's no way the person could ever actually pay off the college loan, right? They end up getting maybe a good enough job somewhere to just bust their hump, but because they're in debt with the school, now they've got other card companies trying to say, hey man, you're in good standing with us. If you're in good standing with them, check this out. We want to help you get a mortgage. That is a French word that means until death. Mortgage. And the banks are like, yeah, we want to check out your assets, man. We'll help you with your finances. So now we got finances, which literally means to find oneself. To find yourself. You're going to get some money and then pay interest on that money. So now you're still in debt for school, right? And now you're going to finance a mortgage, and the banks are going to look at assets. So an asset to the bank is your property, because it's not your asset. An asset would be if I have a vehicle and I loan it to someone for the purpose of their chauffeuring folks, cabbing, Ubering, right? They're paying me to use that vehicle. That's an asset. It means the money's coming in, right? But the car I have sitting out in my driveway, that's not an asset to me. Not. I rely on a whole lot of people for help in a lot of ways, and that vehicle out there, I guarantee you it's not an asset for the awesome people that have helped me keep that thing moving, because it's done a lot for people, man. I mean, it has gone out. I mean, it has taxied people, carried people, pulled people out of rough situations, moved entire, whatever the person had in their belongings, their house. It's done a lot for people. So in that regard, we would look at it as an asset. But I'm not gaining anything as like a regular income from that vehicle. The vehicle, if it had a note on it, and it was financed by the bank, then it would be an asset to the bank, because the bank is collecting money, that interest. They give you whatever the note is, right? And there's an interest comes out of that, right? That's an asset to the bank. It's not your asset. If your backyard is full of groceries, you're egging, you're meating, you're producing tomatoes and cucumbers and all the rest, and then you're setting up a stand in the front yard, paying your $15 city tax fee to sell groceries from your front yard. It's an asset to the city because it's $15 as an income for you to sell groceries from your front yard. So you got an income. So your yard is an asset to you because it's an income to you, right? But then you look at the land tax every year. The land tax, you might be able to get the bank to help you with finance a yearly land tax. Oh yeah, I got $1,000 coming up, and you can't. Yeah, we'd love to help you. So what we'll do is we'll just finance it at 21%, and yeah, we'll help you. So the bank pays that, and then you pay the bank back plus whatever percentage they attach to that. Now the city, it's an asset to the city because you're paying the city. But then also the bank, it's an asset to the bank because it's money coming into them. So insofar as young people going to school, what are they? I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. People that go into trades end up doing the trade, and they actually end up making money sooner than later, and not getting into a whole lot of debt. You ever notice that? Like the people that really support the education system, right, and all its flaws, and wanting teachers to get paid more, and all that sort of thing, they usually have the heaviest debts, the weightier finances and mortgages and things like that. But the folks that are, I guess you might say, blue collar working, they only get into debt in that way if they are having trouble somewhere. It's usually vehicle related or something like that, but they're not carrying around the debt from school, right? That's all high school taught you anyways. I mean, you think about it. You weren't taught finances in high school, public high school. You spent 1 month learning how to do what? Balance a weekly income insofar as it pertains to fuel, groceries, bills, right? That's not finances. That's just balancing a checkbook, right? I mean, you can learn how to do that with one of these. Keep in mind, I was actually homeschooled 3 months out of the year. Well, I guess it would be 4 months because there was it 2 weeks in the fall, 2 weeks in the winter, 2 weeks in the spring, and then 3 months out of the summer. So, but anyways, you can use a tape measure for a lot. And you can also use a pair of these for a lot. But the folks that end up trading out, it's like they're actually going into something that they're actually going to utilize, and they already know what their income is, and they already know what their checks and balances are, and they're not carrying around this huge debt that also brought a lot. Think about it like this: person in the trade, unless they go out and get a credit card or something like that, they're not going to get 10 million phone calls from people trying to get them to drink the Kool-Aid behind another card to get in debt, right? So, oh well, you got to have good credit in order to open a business or get a house or something like that. And I won't disagree with that. But one of the things you can do, because a lot of folks, like after I had spent time in prison, I had never had debt. I still don't, because I never had a credit card or anything like that. And no one was willing to help me with that because they had no way of proving that I was someone that was faithful in, paying the debt. So what I had was a friend that had a rapport with I think it's called a credit union or basically you go in and they might give you $275, and then in 30 days you pay back $300. And based on his word, they gave me that. And I did one thing. I took the $275, I put it in my Bible, I left it there until it was time to pay that bill. And I took $25 and I gave them back the $275 that they gave me plus $25. And I did that for, I don't know, probably a year. And the reason why I did that is because I was literally purchasing my credit. And so years being in prison, you might take this to your family. This will be informational as well. If you have a credit card, some folks have to put money on the phone for guys and gals in prison, and send money for their groceries or whatever. If you have a card in your name, you can put a card in your son or daughter's name that's in prison. They don't even know the card number. They don't know the router number. They don't nothing. They don't know any of it. They just know that they're getting money sent to them, right? But as a family, we're family banking. My son needs this card, and the bank's sure. Yeah, we want to help with that, right? So now he's got a card with his. So what you're doing now is you're taking money from your bank account, you're putting on a card with his or her name on it. And then every time you put money on their phone account, or every time you put money on their commissary, you use that card. To build their credit. So this person could be in prison for however long, right? Like I said, mom, dad, or auntie, or whoever, the whole family. If you ever send someone that you know money in prison, all the family, if you have some type of credit card, you can help them build their credit. So whenever they get out of prison, they don't end up like me. I couldn't get a credit card, and I'm glad that I couldn't. I just didn't know that you had to have a form of credit in order to get like credit cards. But like I said, I went to a credit union with my partner, and he essentially vouched for me. And if I didn't pay that $300 back, well, then it was contracted. He had to pay it. So I guess you might want to get someone that you're somewhat scared of. I wasn't necessarily scared of my friend, but he and I spent some time in prison together, so we knew the deal. But that's how you can help build credit, and that's what you're doing with the credit, anyways. You're not trying to get. That's what the kids in college do. The kids in college end up getting in debt, and then they've got a billion people trying to finance everything for them or get them a card. Or get just basically whenever you're in the system where federal dollars are paying for whatever school you're going to, now everybody else is attached to that insofar as people that just want to sell you something, get you more in debt. So that's what public school teaches us. Public school teaches us that if you don't get a scholarship, right? Because again, you go to school to get a good grade so that you can get a good job and work for someone else for the rest of your life. Doctors, people that let's say that under 10% of people that actually go to medical school that end up in the medical field, they have a lot of stuff based on good credit for the most part, because they just keep getting in debt. they're just getting in debt. Um, they'll pay off, what is it? It takes 10 years to finally pay off the debt behind the uh, college college fees if they weren't, scholarshiped. Um, but you take a person that just goes into the trade, and a lot of these schools, public schools, they got the trade right. That's what America wants. They want people in the trades. They want people to go out there and blue collar work and this and that. When we look at the industrialized, um, when America was an industrial nation, um, those were the guys that were working their butts off and bringing in the money and things like that. And um, it was hard. And a lot of people died. I mean, even the towers that were built in New York City. I think there was I don't think it was 2,000. I can't remember. It might have been 2,000. There were like 2,000 people that fell off that building or died in an accident somehow. But there were probably 40,000 hands that helped build that place. You know what I mean? And in an industrialized world, we're never going to not need a welder, right? So people who enjoy, like me, I enjoy welding. I like it. And here's the thing about school. If you're like me, when I was a kid, I'm 3 years old. They cracked me over the head with autism. Got all these different learning disabilities, and I'm ADHD, ADD. I mean, I'm a boy. I'm a male. I want to move. If you can keep me on the move and learn me something, it'll probably stick. But if you gotta sit me right here and everyone's got to be quiet, and it's a problem. That's just a problem, right? But that's what we do in public schools. We say go to school to get a good grade so you can get a good job, and then you work for someone else for the rest of your life, right? And even some of the people in the trades do that. But the people that end up going to college thinking that's where they're going to get the greater benefits of better jobs, over 90% of them don't actually end up doing whatever it is they went to college for, but they have this debt for the rest of their life. It's the same thing with the banks and the finances. The word finance is a French word, and it means define yourself, right? You're finding yourself to go to college, and then you end up paying for college, and it can take at least a decade before you ever actually get that payment. But you still have more debt now because all these people keep calling you and sending you, and the banks want to help you. I'm going to help you get out of debt, but to do that, you got to get in debt. You got to be financed, right? And so maybe you do get a mortgage, 30-year mortgage, 15-year mortgage, whatever. But the word mortgage means until death. People that don't pay their mortgage off in this lifetime because they had to keep refinancing or get another mortgage, their family members end up with that debt. That's how the secular educational system frames up their working class. But like I said, even though I was a product of public school, the homeschooling that I had 4 months out of the year on my granddaddy's farm and ranch, there is nothing that there's not one thing that my granddaddy taught me and my grandma taught me on that farm and ranch that I cannot and do not, for the most part, use to this very day. And insofar as having done jobs out there that were definitely blue collar, I loved the jobs. I'm a boy. I just want to be doing something high energy, high impact. Can't do that anymore because I've got stenosis and I've got neuropathy and bulging discs and bulbous discs, and I got a lot of things going on in my two crushed spinal sections, spinal cord crushes, But the the jobs that people go to college for, the degrees that they go to college for. And listen, I went to college, right? But again, going back to how the conversation sort of broke down, it was like, well, having been homeschooled, me too. I was 4 months out of the year. uh, and honestly, whenever it come to the classes and things like that that I took in remedial reading, I was in those classes until I was in the sixth grade. So, and I did first grade twice. Um, I liked those teachers, and I liked the way they broke things down. There's a video I'm trying to get. Um, I have 4 times tried to get the LBC, the 1689, chapter 3:3. Um, but these are some of the things that I picked up when I was in remedial reading classes, right? And so this is public school. Um, but if they weren't, teachers that specialized in, helping kids with learning disabilities or autism, um, I just didn't gain the same because there was more interaction in those classes where I had uh, where I had to learn how to do things, where I had to map things out. This right here would be the equivalent of one of these on my granddad's farm ranch, right? Like this right here was more helpful in all of my reading and all of my spelling and all of my comprehension of punctuation and things like that. Um, that is where I really got a grip on things, right? And so as far as public school is concerned, um, I did benefit from that, but I also have to be thankful that my grandfather and my grandfather were so patient with me whenever it came to teaching me how to read from a King James Bible, teaching me why we speak the way we do today versus how we used to speak in the Middle English, and uh, how to comprehend contextual things. Um, so, if every public school, if you will, had teachers that were specialized, I guess, with children that were, going to be boys and they're going to interact and they're going to be just moving around and they've got to have 3 things going on at once in order to, get the. There might be some benefit to that, right? But as a product of Roman schools, public schools, I picked up a lot of useless information, and a lot of that useless information came from not just my constituent, my classmates, but it also came from some of the things that the teachers taught. And y'all know we want to teach evolution, but there's nobody there to prove anything, and they don't call it the theory, the Big Bang theory, or it's like they're taking the theory part out, and it's all what you call an educated guess, right? But we can go into um, what history. We look at newspapers. We read this newspaper, that newspaper. Well, the man here, he admitted to touching his son. Well, if you compare that to the newspaper that was written over here about the same person, it says men admitted to touching his son, but never inappropriately. See, one controls a narrative that really looks pretty harmful, whereas the other one, well, the OSBI is just going to drop the case. Why are they going to drop the case? Because they don't have any way of proving that that the allegations are true. They can't. There's no way to do it, right? That's how we look at history, and that's how we know, because there's creditable eyewitnesses or creditable uh, folks that are editing whatever, and so that's how we determine the historical things, right? And when we're going through scripture, for example, that it's the same. It's the same tricking. We have to go through a historical document some of which are what we would call extra biblical, meaning they're outside of the Bible, right? But some of those things that were written by people that weren't Christians, they witnessed the same things, right? We don't document that with Scripture because we know that's not uh, inspired, God breathed, but historically we can prove those things. We can't prove Big Bang when no one's there. It's just an educated guess. Insofar as evolution is concerned, we go from in evolution in the schools they're teaching that there are humans today that evolved from monkeys, and that 90 something percent of their DNA is the same. Really, it's only about 70 something percent, right? But here's the thing: a designer has a way of designing things that are unique to the designer, right? So if monkeys have eyes and humans have eyes and fish have eyes and bird have eyes, it's because the designer gave them eyes, right? But they go from, but what they say is you go from a monkey man to a human, right? But they don't have any way of proving it. Again, when you're proving history, we have to look at documentation. We have to take it all in order to come to a conclusion that has the right conclusion, right? But whenever we don't have any way of proving that humans probably have more insofar as, DNA patternistic structure, they probably look more like a banana than they do a bonobo. You know what I'm saying? Like, but some folks will say the missing link. They love to push the missing link thing. Well, the missing link is a missing link. It's missing because it's missing. It doesn't exist. So I'm going to put a conclusion based on a missing link, something that I cannot prove. I'm going to put all that just because two things look similar, right? Insofar as, like what Scripture says, insofar as kinds are concerned, kinds. There's only one kind of human, and we know that humans have yet in the folks can take historical documentation right now. They can trace back a couple thousand years their own family bloodline, right? And with all the swabbing and then all the newspapers and then all the things that were left behind in ancient cities that were covered by a volcano or whatever, between the history and the findings, all of those things can be proved because there were creditable eyewitnesses, there were creditable documents that were left to prove, this person's family bloodline for 2,000 years, whatever. Okay. My point is that insofar as being able to prove, like, people come from monkeys, there's a kind when it comes to a monkey, and that kind is based on whether or not they can procreate. And humans and monkeys can't do that. We say, well, shoot, we can get a human being and a goat together and flask it up and have a test tube baby up. That thing doesn't live very long because it's not the same kind. You got to do a lot of reconstruction insofar as the DNA is concerned to even get that thing to reproduce, and then you've got to keep it alive, right? If we look at a donkey, we know there's a horse and a horse and a mule, or I'm sorry, a mule is a horse and a donkey. So they're the same kind. So if you breed them together, then they end up with a mule, right? Because a horse and a donkey, they're the same kind, right? You look at the quarter horses, the stature of the build, or you look at the Arabian the Arabian horses, beautiful long leg, just mean. Those things just look mean. Um, you know, these two things you can pair them together and they'll reproduce, right? Dogs, there's different types of dogs, but there's only one kind of canine, and it's one kind, right? You take a poodle and lock it up with a German Shepherd, it's going to produce, right? But you can't put a German Shepherd on a bonobo and come up with a, I don't even know what you would call it. It just doesn't work, right? Um, I guess for evolutionists, there would be the missing link. Um, and it's missing because it doesn't exist. It's not real. And these are the kind of things that, you know, are pushed into the education system. For what? It's useless information. It's just useless. But if we get to Scripture, Scripture makes it clear that your children are your children. They're not the state's children. And once you lock them into, you know, the ward of the state, right, they become the state's property, and now the state's responsible for what it is that they do and do not learn. And that's not biblical. It's not. Um, and I think that, you know, I became a product of a secular school, of a public school. But I was homeschooled 4 months out of the year on my granddaddy's farm and ranch. Every day. It didn't matter if it was Monday or Saturday. Every day. And every Sunday, we was at church learning Bible. So that's not, it's not any, you know, it's not like there's a break. But every day on granddaddy's farm and ranch, 4 months out of the year, we were homeschooling. And for me, the things that I value today, insofar as um, the the experience, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have trades, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have, you know, skilled professional doctors and things like that. But the things that are taught in, you know, schools are for the most part, there's a lot of social sciences that are involved. You teach a child very young that millions of years ago, dinosaurs. But we don't teach the child that it was in the 1840s that the word dragon was the word used. And today we use the word dinosaur. And so we don't educate them on that to where they can have their own free thinking, free thought, right? We don't teach them that the word dragon is in the older Bibles, the older English Bibles. Dragons are described, and you know, today folks would call them dinosaurs. But the Bible doesn't mention dragons a million years ago, right? We have historical, even in places in like is it Sweden and some of those other places. There are dinosaur findings. There are dinosaur, what they would call dragons. You look at the things that are etched into the carvings and things like that. Up until the 16th century, not all of them were great big like we see. But even in the 1300s, the Emperor of China, they had a parade for him, and he had dragons pulling his carriage. And then they have drawings and etchings of what these dragons, what they call dragons, what they looked like, right? But we always tell the kids at school it was millions of years ago. First of all, nobody was there to prove it, right? And what happens a lot of times is the bone people get their information from the rock people. This is what I mean. The rock people look at the different layers of certain types of rock in certain types of areas, right, where they're finding bones, right? So they're given an estimation, if you will, an estimation on what they think the timeline could be. Well, the bone people go and they look at what we would call a prehistoric elephant, and they measure the bone with a certain type of carbon, and I'm saying the carbon testing. And so they test this animal here with this certain type of carbon testing, right? And it pushes the date out, 36 million years or something like that, right? And then they use a different carbon method, a different group, and they test the same animal, just a different part of the bone, and they get an even longer date, right? But if you use the basic carbon testing test that there is on everything, nothing has uh, nothing has more than half has lost more than half of its carbon value, right? So in order to do that, I mean, you're looking at over 5,000, almost 5,200 years for something to completely lose all of its carbon, an animal to lose all of its carbon value. It would literally have to be dead for in certain circumstances too. I mean, when the flood came, everything was locked in, right? The silica was locked in. Was it Montana or Colorado or something? We found the remains of a T-Rex, right? And inside of the remains of the T-Rex, there were still red blood cells available for testing. The silica in the flood smashed everything together and petrified it, right? Under those circumstances, we would be able to accurately test because we have red blood cells, right? Anything that is more than 5,200 years old, it's not going to have any carbon, and the blood cells are not going to be available. This right here is a petrified tangerine. Under certain circumstances, certain conditions of my car, when I was working for the union, well, these little suckers rolled out of my lunchbox, and I didn't find it until I cleaned it a few weeks later, right? But this is a matter of days. It's a matter of days. It's petrified. It's tangerine, right? And guess what? If you were to break into this thing, you would find carbon. Here is something you're not going to find carbon in. See, the rock people, there's no carbon in rocks unless they find a tangerine in it. And so the bone people are respectfully taking the suggestions, the educated guesses from the bone people, right? And then the bone people likewise are giving educated guesses to the rock people. So you just have this circular idea that's floating around, and it's not something that you can prove. Evolution cannot be proved insofar as if I bury this, right, in a certain amount of years, this is going to go from an iPhone to a iPhone 60. There's an iPhone 6 SE. If I bury it, then it's going to evolve. There's no way to prove that. It's just not. We understand the evolution insofar as climates and things like that. People can have a change in how their body reacts or produces, or like my body doesn't have a lot of melanin in it, right? However, if I was to move closer to the equator and have offspring down there in the next 400 years, the adaptation of the melanin on the grid in our bodies would probably add melanin. So over time, something that we all have already would possibly add to that. And then, insofar as humans, uh, they're all one Adamic race. Acts 17:26 says that God created one man, or was it one blood, all men, every nation. And so, what I mean to say in that is that humans can reproduce. It doesn't matter. Uh, it doesn't make a difference where you come from, right? But the thing about the evolutionists is that there's a missing link between the monkey and the man. There's no way to prove that, and they can't reproduce. There's no way they can reproduce. But Acts 17, 26, I want to say this right. I feel really tired. They gave me some new medicine from my neuropathy. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth. That's my ESV. I usually use my JMac NA. Oh, my arm. Oh, man, you can believe this little thing is heavy. Oh, but no, I think the wording in the ESV is right, but I prefer how the Greek is translated in the NASB. Yeah, the way it says it here, it has man in italics. So he made from one man, but we understood, it was just understood. He made from one every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined appointed times and boundaries of their inhabitations. So he made from one. We all come from Adam. We all come from the first man. So we like to, put people in these racial categories and things like that. And it's not biblical. You can have national categories, but there's no such thing as like the white race and the black race, and it's all human. One might just be more exuberant than the other based on melanin, right? But some folks would say, well, if this made babies with this, then this would be dominant. Well, the offspring's not going to come out looking like this. It's going to be lighter. So my only question is this dominant? So if I use the same logic, right, when you come out with a child that comes from a melon exuberant parent and a not so melanin exuberant parent, right? And now it's kind of somewhere on this spectrum in between, right? So it's not that one is more dominant than the other. We understand recessive genes and things like that. We get that kind of thing. But both human beings just created offspring because they're of the same kind. They're not a separate race. They may have a history of families coming from different ethnic backgrounds, right? But I was born in Oklahoma, born and raised in Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is in America. I realized that America wasn't always the way it is today. But this is where I was born, just like whoever was here in the Americas first, right? They were born here. So was I, no matter what I look like. Insofar as, having family members that were full-blooded Native American, that are on the Dawes Road, that have CDIVs. I don't look like them, right? But
my great grandmother loved me, man. I'm telling you, she loved me. When I was 5 years old, we'd sit out on her screened-in. She had a great big in her old house before she moved to her. Granddaddy put her on the farm and ranch in a big trailer, big trailer. Um, but uh, we would go out there on that. She had a screened-in back patio that was added to this tiny little house. Like my house is tiny, and she had a huge back patio for dining and just all the windows would open and it was just great. And anyways, she'd chew tobacco and she'd give me some chewing tobacco. And my brother still has the spit tune. It's a brass spit tune. He says it's got a big crack in the side of it now, but um, we would sit out there and we would chew tobacco and talk and spit, and that was one of the most grand experiences of my life, right? Uh, and My grandmama had she had more melanin than I did, right? That's my great grandmother. Um, and even though I don't have a CDID, I'm her grandson, her great grandson. It didn't change. Like, it's not like she's looking at me like, oh, he's not indigenous. He's not really my great grandson. It's just, that's just lunacy, man. You know what I mean? Like, we try to frame up these ideas. It's like the entire world has almost become, or at least here in America, has become narcissistic in a way. You know what I mean? Every nation, no matter where they come from, you figure people were leaving Europe to come to America because they were trying to flee persecution based on their Christian faith. Well, when they got here, um, there were people here that were already having conflicts with other people that were here also, all of which will say they're indigenous. Uh, and I don't argue that, but there were people leaving a conflict, people, and they came to another continent where there were people having conflicts, and for some they, made babies and married, and then for others there was war, there was conflict. Right, so it just progressively turns into this thing where the whole planet, insofar as history is concerned, is um, proving that humans are human. Humans are human. There was one race, um, and there's always change. There's always a different group of people. Um, like when we look at people in the Congo, um, there's people over there that are still being enslaved. They are. They're not being enslaved by white people, right? And when we have Portuguese people moving in and out of Africa to with boats and things like that, and the British and the French and everybody trying to colonize. Colonization isn't enslaving people, right? Colonization is where countries want to more or less just have a range of capacity to navigate capitalism, I guess. But when when the people that are already there that have conflict with other tribes, right, are enslaving people, right? Then there's, well, here, I'll sell you these for, you know, 50 guns and 50,000 rounds of ammunition. Whatever, I don't know how they bartered back then, but my point is that there were people that thought that was a good idea, and they looked more like me, but they got the people that they purchased those people from people that looked like this, which is still going on over there today. I don't know that white people are actually um, purchasing anyone, but my point is um, the the mixing and the conflict, and I say mixing, I mean the different ethnic groups making children and the different conflicts, they're already there, right? Before people figured out how to make bombs and make boats, and there was already conflict going on in those nations, right? And so now you just mix it all up, you got more conflict, right? But all that does is really just proves that um, humans are human. We're all human. There's not a different race of human. The Bible calls them kind. It uses the word kind whenever it talks about, the different animals. And we look at secular education systems that do not want what they would call religion in the schools. When schools were schools, it was it was the church house was the schoolhouse. But evolution is a religion. It takes so much more faith to believe something that has no connection, no eyewitnesses, no way of proving millions of years. You got absolutely no way of proving it. A lot of educational guesswork takes place. And folks that put their children, not the state's children, in the public education system. Maybe they were in the public education system. They put their children in the public education system. And this stuff keeps getting convoluted, and then you're looking at a state like Oklahoma, and we're number 49 in the nation of having, educational standards. We just lowered it again. We're at 49. We just want kids to get a piece of paper that says they completed high school and then shove them into the next part of whatever brings success to capitalism. And I'm not really all against capitalism, you know what I mean? I'm not one of those people that has a lot of understanding into the fine details of capitalism. But in some regards, all of us that are trying to do something to make money and then figure out a way to ensure that we continue to have an income, an asset, right? We're exercising some of the same thinking that capitalists do. They just do it on a worldwide scale instead of a small scale. So when you're on Granddaddy's Farm and Ranch and you're learning arithmetic and reading and writing and spelling and contextualization and all of the sciences that come from working the land and understanding how something has to die before it can actually produce a good quality. I mean, I've seen seeds come right off of something before and it grow into a sprout, but it's not always successful. But anytime you have seeds that die and then you drop them in water for half a day or a whole day and they kind of sprout out, you can look at those. The ones that aren't going to grow, you can take a pair of tweezers and pull them right out, because they're not going to, in the water, they're not going to germinate. They're not going to have a little sprig or whatever you call it that's coming off the seed. Right? But the rest of them, you can just throw them out there in dirt and sprinkle them with some manure, and they're going to lock in. But if I have to rely on people that, especially like America uses so much crap to grow food and kill weeds and Um, we're shameful. I was looking at something earlier today talking about bread in America isn't actually bread in other nations, like because some of the things that we do to um, the produce, um, and then the things that we add to, they're illegal in other nations. And so that's why you have folks here in the Americas that um, have a reaction to um, foods with gluten in it. But in other nations, they're just making stuff that's just organic. You know what I mean? It doesn't have all the crap. And someone who has like issues with gluten in America, the young man said he didn't have it in other countries, so he could eat bread. Um, but man, if I'm growing my own wheat and I'm grinding my own wheat, and I'm actually getting Himalayan salt, and I'm getting cane sugar. Um, uh, I can make crackers. Yeah, I can. I can make some crackers, and I know exactly what's in it. You know what I mean? Um, and people in the secular schools would have you believe that it's just not feasible. And for some folks, I mean, it's one of those things where it's a struggle. It is. It's a struggle today for folks to actually get moving. I'm one of those examples. I've run into my health conditions, and I'm either waiting for paralyzation or death. I mean, we're all waiting for death, but um, in the meantime, I have to do something so that my bones will become denser, because as we get closer to death, they lose density, right? And if we just sit, then you actually have major health problems, right? But if you're moving, staying moving, and I'm not saying exercise, people work on a farm, but believe me, they're exercising every day. But putting things in your body that don't cause you to just, like when I eat hamburgers, I usually don't eat the bread. I like hamburger buns. I love hamburger buns. But I can tell you, every time I eat a hamburger that has, the wonderful hamburger bun attached to it, I feel like I need a nap. I do. But if I just eat, a hamburger, I mean, you might call it a Salisbury steak, and I throw all the vegetables on it and everything else, I get full, but then I want to go outside and play. It's different. I spend a lot of time eating nuts and grains and fruits that have been dehydrated, and frozen fruits, because the things that we put on, let's say you put fresh fruit, as soon as people walk into the door of Walmart, on one side they're going to see fresh fruit, and that fruit's going to sit there for days until people buy it, and it's going to be replaced with more fresh fruit. The stuff that they spray on there is what's keeping it from um, wilting away in front of a constantly open Walmart front door. So they're keeping it cool over here, but then you got heat coming in here, unless it's in the cold season. Um, but the stuff they spray on, you might get a thing of blueberries like this for $8, right, in the fresh fruit. But if you go into the frozen fruit section, where all they've done is brought the blueberries in, rinsed them all off, thrown them in a bag, sealed the bag, and then they froze it. There's nothing on it. Now, I would question the companies that are growing and what they're using in the fields, but my point is you can get, where this is $8 for that much. For $8, you can get this much in the frozen section, right? And blueberries, to me, when they're frozen, you can get brain freeze if you eat too fast, but it's like pieces of candy, right? I like candy, some candy, but I prefer blueberries. And I know that when you're sleeping, your body will convert fat into adenosine triphosphate, and that's happening while you're asleep. So when you wake up and then you eat another bowl of blueberries, well, then it's like drinking 3 cups of coffee, and you're not buzzed by caffeine. You're just if you're like me and you're a boy and you're ADHD and you got to keep it moving, um, then uh, blueberries are great. I'm just saying that blueberries are great. But you can also live on that. You know, there's things in strawberries. You get those in the frozen. You can actually get mixtures of frozen berries. But strawberries are a vegetable or a fruit that have, I believe it's in the seed. Um, there's a nutrient in there that humans have to have, right, for different production. And whenever it comes to, um, I believe, heart health, artery health. Um, I'll have to go back and look that up, but we can't get it from anything else but strawberries. Um, but if you go into the fresh fruit section, you get a thing of strawberries like this for $13. Well, the same $13 in the frozen section, you can get a bag. You know what I mean? Um, but if I grow my own strawberries, which isn't hard to do, um, then that's something that I don't have to, whenever it comes to um, electricity, running water, yearly land tax, that sort of thing. Maybe you have to pay for your post office, whatever. If I'm growing food, and I'm really, as Americans, we love to eat. We are alive on this planet to eat. We love it. And I'm not saying anything bad, because I'm one of those guys, I like to splurge sometimes. But when we eat to live, the quality of life looks different. And we also, I think, at least if we have the capability of budgeting, because we do have an income, it allows us to see the budget being helped instead of compromised when we can produce our own food, because we don't have to buy it. We don't have to pay money. This money just came in. Now I've got to pay all these bills and then buy food. We don't have to do that. It's a secular idea for guys to go into big corporations and get stuck working for someone else forever. That's how they're training the children in secular schools, and a lot of the quote unquote education that they're receiving is it's garbage. It's religion. It's religious is what they're being taught. And so having been homeschooled, went to public school, but having been homeschooled every year from 4 to 12 or 13 years old, I think that if folks, respect what the Bible says about raising your kids, and the admonition and fear of God, your kids are going to have parents that want them to learn what's necessary to navigate life. And if there's a, certain thing they've got to learn to get through the public school system, and you're homeschooling, and make sure they know those things so they can answer the questions the way the secular social scientists want them to answer them, right? But they need to know, dinosaur, for example, is a word that was invented in the 1840s, and it replaced the word dragon. We look at dragons now as being something mythological and not real, but we find them in the earth. We also find that word in the Bible. And so if there is something that, dad can do, say you have a dad that's out there, he's traded out, he's gone into a trade, he's a welder, he's bringing in pretty good money. start having children, mom can actually educate those children. She can. If she's educated, she can. Let's say back in the day, whenever people didn't have education system the way they do today, they didn't. The state didn't have much awards or award of the state. You know what I mean? There's not a bunch of kids in the public system, but maybe a mom is teaching the children things that are necessary for the farm inside the house. Dad is teaching the children things that are necessary for the farm outside the house. And I'm not saying moms and dads can't, do a little bit of both, but my point is that those children are actually going to be learning from the parents what is necessary to maintain, sustain the farm, right? And when it comes to paying the government whatever they want for your grass, your land tax, if they're putting something aside based on what they're bartering, trading, and selling, right? Well, then they'll be able to satisfy the government, right? Stay there forever. And we know this whenever we look at some of the Amish communities. They're good at building things, and so they utilize that money to pay for whatever the government requires. And a lot of them are living on well water. They're just tapped into the earth, and they're not paying the city for water at all. They've had to purchase the tools and the hardware to get the water to run where they need it to run, and buckets and whatever, however they're getting it into the house. If it's not actually running, that's what the children are learning. I think one of the arguments was that they don't have as many opportunities. But again, whenever you look at what the social scientists are, training kids in public schools with they don't people that go and get those degrees, they don't end up in those fields. The majority of them, they don't. Mass majority of them don't. They end up doing something that the rest of us would do anyways, which is like learn how to weld, learn how to frame houses, find a Brahms farm and work somewhere on that farm so we can produce burgers and ice cream for the local Brahms grocery restaurant, right? That's what folks end up doing anyways, right? And much of what we see in scripture, the folks that were living, that's how they live. We say, well, that was different. They didn't have the opportunities back then that we have today. Yes, but look at the opportunities that people do have today, and they get in debt for college or whatever, and they don't even use the education to go into the fields that they're getting their degrees. And so, like I said, the statement was made, by the person, having been homeschooled, as if I wasn't. I guess is what they're thinking, but I wasn't there to argue. I just really wanted to, see their point. That's it. I just wanted to understand their point, and of course there was someone else that, mentioned not talking about politics and religion, and I think we should. And one of the people there in that conversation also said that being uncomfortable is oftentimes how we grow. And having been public school educated and having been 4 months out of the year homeschool educated, having a degree in college, the fundamental things in life that we see insofar as being able to produce for ourselves. We see that in Scripture, and we don't see children being sent off. It's not like they couldn't have sent. They had schools. I mean, when we're looking at the Alexandrian time frame and the libraries were being built and people were going in there and they had groups that were educating, right? But it's not like people were sending their kids off to public school the way we do, right? For the most part, we looked at our offspring as being the future of whatever it is that we had built in our farming or ranching, whatever that was. And so that's what helped fuel the parties of, the bureaucratical folks that just did a lot of arguing. You gotta eat, they gotta drink, gotta have them coins so they can pay for the stuff that, so if I have a home and I've got some dirt and I've got some seeds, then I can produce something, and I can learn how to do a better job of it each year. And if I do have, I've got my roommate calls it a Taj Mahal of chicken coops, and the guy next door is where we get these pallets. I was showing him pictures and videos of my Taj Mahal of chicken coops, because they were into building chicken coops, and they're just these small box things. Mine are more free ranging inside of the coop. The coop is actually built like a run, and but if I can keep producing chickens and keep producing eggs, well, then I can have I call it a residual income. My roommate calls it a passive income. But I'll also be able to provide, fruits and vegetables. And so that takes away from some of the spending on things, and you can put it towards maintaining and sustaining your farm and ranch. So, maybe you live in an apartment. There's things you can grow inside an apartment, you know what I mean, that will cost you less for the seeds, and then once it starts to produce, well, then you won't have to go to the grocery store buy, even if it's just a tomato plant by the window, you know what I mean, like, you won't have to buy tomatoes. It just makes sense. I mean, you just come in every day and water that sucker and turn it in front of the window so it gets some sunlight. I mean, and it's also good for the environment inside the home. What it breathes in, it breathes back out. Quality air. So I've been to public school, I've been homeschooled, I've been to college, and I know the experience is probably different for everyone, especially if, like, say you have a child that doesn't respect the parents. So whenever it comes to homeschooling, it's going to be a challenge, right? Maybe you have parents that aren't really educated, and there was a time where people didn't have, these fancy educations, right? But the parent can actually, learn what it is that they have to. If they're capable of learning, then they can learn what it is that secular schools require for them to get a state, nation recognized high school equivalency, right? And in the meantime, they can teach them the truths behind the lies in the religious system of public education. And that's the point, or at least my point, the point that I'm trying to make. That's the point. Once you hand your kids over to the secular scientist of the religious public schools, you're really kind of disqualifying yourself as a parent, if you ask me, biblically, and you're not raising your children the school is raising your children in that way. And that also is a disqualifier. Um, so I would, if I was, whoever's brave enough to listen to me ramble, um, whether you disagree or not, and maybe you do agree, probably most people disagree, but I would make sure that you know what your children are being taught, and then know what the Bible says about what they're being taught. And then have those conversations with them, because now if they have all of the information, right, then they can make an informed decision for themselves. But if they just get a one-sided bias indoctrination that controls a narrative, right, then they're only getting a portion of information that they think is right, because they don't know this part. If the Bible talks about one of the angels spoke, and then in another gospel writing it says that there were two angels, but it didn't mention the speaking. It just mentioned two angels. Well, people look at that like it's a contradiction, but it's not a contradiction. You had eyewitnesses of an account that took place from more than one person, and one just documented that there were two angels. They didn't mention anything about the conversation, whereas the other one was talking about the conversation between the person and the angel. That's how you know there's no collusion. There's no manipulation. If everybody said the exact same thing in a court, they go in there in front of a judge and they say the exact same thing, he's going to suspect that there is some collusion taking place, because your words are exactly the same. You're not bringing anything about this particular situation in your own words as you saw it. You're saying the exact same thing the person before you said, and they said the same thing the person before them said, and so on and so forth. That's how you know when there's collusion. That's how you know when there's some booty chatter taking place. Some of my friends don't like that word. But if you're in a situation, especially financially, where both parents are working and your kids are wards of the state, interact with what they're being taught at school, not just by their teachers but by their friends, and use scripture to ensure that they have all of the information, and not just a one-sided bias indoctrination. The Bible talks about things that are embarrassing. If we see how Scripture doesn't leave out, kings, things that were documented about the king, there was no embarrassing things left in Scripture or in their documents. They always make kings look like giants and good at being kings. They leave out the embarrassing things. And Scripture doesn't do that whenever it comes to Christians. Paul said he was the least of the saints. He didn't feel like he was qualified. You know what I mean? And exposes, what type of person he was before he was saved. People, we see that women were at the tomb and saw it empty, and the men are documenting that the women brought them this information, and of course they qualified that what they were saying was actually true. But in that time frame, typically people only took the word of the males, so it had to come from a male, right? So that's kind of embarrassing, right? I could keep going down a list as it comes to my mind, but the point in that is that when you have collusion, which is pretty much, if you ask me, insofar as like the Big Bang Theory, can't prove it, and then evolution, can't prove the missing links because they're missing. Children just need to You know, if you're a parent that has to put your child in school and you can't homeschool them yourself, interact with them, find out what they're learning, and then show them what the Bible says. And you can even help them understand why. Because, you know, you're going to have people in schools, the people that go to the schools, and then you're going to have the teachers that are going to try to disqualify the Bible. Know how to qualify that this is a historical document, right? This is God breathed, but insofar as history is concerned, there are creditable eyewitnesses that go down a long ways. And so, what the child gets to do at that point is make an informed decision for themselves, because you're allowing them to have all of the information. It's like earlier I was talking about the newspaper. You know, the OSC and .net will say that man admits to touching his child. Well, of course, that's the newspaper article that the DA wants in the OSC and .net. She does not want the Oklahoma City newspaper in there that says man admits to touching his child, but never inappropriately. Mentions that having changed diapers, give baths, check temperatures. We don't want that in the court, because it's not a good narrative, because now people have all of the information. Whenever they have all the information, they can make an informed decision for themselves. But if all they have is man admits to touching his son, see, that's an indoctrination. And when we send our kids to public schools and they're learning, they're not really learning things, but whenever they're being educated, when they're given information that's based on not science, can't prove millions of years, folks. All the clans on the top of the highest mountains in every part of the world are in a closed position. That is not how they die. When they die, they bust open. You can find thousands of these things in one spot on the tallest mountains in the world. How did they get there? These things are in the water. Well, we can qualify that the Bible speaks truth about a worldwide flood. A worldwide flood. Because on every continent in the world, at the highest peak of every mountain, you're going to find clams in the closed position, frozen in time, solidified, just like this. This was bought last summer. That's a tangerine. It is petrified. So under the right conditions, you know, I can, you know, help the you as a parent can help the child, you know, understand science in that way. It doesn't take millions of years to petrify anything. Doesn't. Under the right circumstances, the climate, the temperature, a tangerine can become petrified in a matter of days. Now they have all the information. They can make an informed decision for themselves. If the teacher says it takes millions of years to petrify something, but you're holding a tangerine that was petrified in your vehicle because it rolled out of your lunchbox, the child's just going to know that. And that's good. That's good that they can see the religion of public school while they're interacting with parents that want them to have all of the information. So I know I kind of ramble on about that, but you know, sometimes whenever I have conversations with folks, I like to share the conversation, and I wasn't really, you know, trying to argue. I was just trying to understand. I think that people have a presupposition based on, you know, conversations probably in the past, and because I don't really go with their narrative, I think they're offended. And so it's like I'm being called intolerant of what it is that they're trying to prove, and it causes sort of an offense in a way that makes them intolerant of what it is that I'm questioning. So even though I'm not forcing any kind of ideology or religion or political position. I'll ask questions just to understand why their position is the way it is. And when we're talking about public school versus, homeschool, and someone kind of pops off like, well, having been homeschooled, I don't have to argue with them. Like, obviously, they don't think that I was homeschooled. They just don't. They've got a presupposition in their mind that I'm, some severe uh, right, right conservative, and that presupposition, um, it sort of builds an offense. So they have this presupposition that's going to go into like a defensive posture. And well, having been homeschooled, I was too. I was homeschooled also. I got public school, homeschool, college. I got all of them. So I don't have to like argue. Well, I was homeschooled also. Having been homeschooled, you know what I mean? Like I don't have to. I don't have to argue that. I'm just trying to figure out why you take the position that you take, and I'm not saying your position is wrong. Um, Obviously, folks' experiences can be different. This is what I will tell you about homeschool kids, though. Um, of all the homeschool kids, at least in the state of Oklahoma, the majority of them end up in college, right? And whatever degree they're working towards, they actually end up utilizing that degree. I would say only about 2% of I believe those are the statistics in Oklahoma. Only about 2% of the kids that were homeschooled end up off the radar completely, right? But the majority of them end up in a field that they've been sort of driven into just based on their nature and experience, and they end up doing that. They're like, oh man, there were probably there's at least 2 dozen young people at our church not long ago that graduated. And keep in mind, they graduated what the state requires for a high school diploma, and most of these young people were like 15 years old, and they've already applied for college, and they're starting college this fall. You know what I'm saying? Um, and they're going to end up being whatever it is they're going towards. They're going to end up in that field. I know that I have some cousins. One was 14 and one was 16 when they started college, and they were also uh, public school students. Their parents believed that the interaction with societal norms is important. I would argue, because I've been to public school, and I had, insofar as values are concerned, um, I didn't utilize what I understood. I was a rotten kid, but I think that because I was influenced by um, my societal norms, um, and a lot of the peer people call it peer what was it where they're peer pressure. That's just how peers support each other. It's a pressure. It's a pressure cooker, and I was definitely in that environment, and I picked up a lot of things that I wasn't taught were good insofar as values when I was on the farm and ranch being homeschooled. And when I was on the farm and ranch being homeschooled, I, and working that farm and ranch and all those animals, I loved it. I loved being there. But like my cousins that brilliant, brilliant, and they're in the fields that they work towards, but they also have parents that were really interactive and of course, they have their positions. Like I don't think you want your kid to go to public school to interact with societal norms because public schools are filthy, man. I mean, and I'm not just talking about dust on the floors. I just mean um, the the public schools end up raising your children in a way that I think causes um, major moral unfortunes and a lot of stuff that's being pushed isn't even fact. So but they had parents that they were also they're brilliant and they went into the fields that they worked towards, and they were homeschooled or public school, but they also had parents that were interactive, and so there were conversations that were had. And so uh, again, if you're one of those parents or you're two parents and financially things just aren't working out to where just one of you can have a job, uh, a lot of that I would ask, how are you living? What are you trying to keep up with the Joneses, or are you just trying to make sure that you have what you have, and what you need? I'm sorry, have what you need. Um, it's there's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we can do at home from home that might relieve some of the financial burdens because the societal norms, especially in Oklahoma, they're just going to produce a working class blue collar group of people and to try to make the economy in a way where um, not only do they keep federal dollars coming in for their schools to build more blue collar workers and get young people in debt for their whole life, starting with college. Um, they're going to make it hard in a way insofar as spending is concerned. So if I can produce, a lot of stuff, and however much grass I have in my yard, or however much dirt I can bring in buckets into my apartment, I am relieving some of the financial stresses, and that's a way to work towards um, maybe one parent, specifically the man, working where the woman, and the woman, especially when we're speaking like biblical women, right, does work. What they do at home is work. They do. You got a good woman that's at home taking care of the things that uh, you can't as a man because you're out welding, and she's also ensuring that the children have a good understanding of the Bible. And of course, there's so many things that we can look at online. If I don't understand calculus, there's probably somebody on a YouTube video that can help me understand calculus. I don't know what a person would need calculus for unless they got into um, some of the dimensions and things that are necessary for it's like a program for a computer that basically you're building cabinets or building AutoCAD, and I can see that if that's the field that you're going into. But if the school's pushing it on people like they need this calculus, and they've got ideas of you know more industrialization, right? Then it makes sense that they would want kids to understand calculus. But whenever it comes to scientific facts, just teach them evolution. Nobody can prove it. And when people have misinformation, it's real easy for folks to. And I was one of those kids. Um, I got sucked into a lot of that stuff. Having this theory that we came from monkeys. But that's useless information. It's not going to do anything for you if you're a welder. You're not welding for monkeys unless you're building a zoo. But you know, there are certain things that, you know, will be basic. And if, you know, a kid wants to become an architect, well, then they may get more information from uh, YouTube channels that helps them with you know, calculus and things like that. Now, if they choose to go to college, which I'm not saying that they shouldn't experience college if that's something that they're driven to do and they have the capacity to do it. Um, However, I would say that it's not necessary, especially if you blue collar raised. You know, if you're a boy, you probably have high energy. You can't sit still. Um, you just want your hands in dirt. You know what I mean? Like um, calculus might come in handy whenever you're, you know, trying to AutoCAD a row of raised beds with some decor that's pretty. You know, you might want to experience that. And but having been public school, public school, and also homeschooled, and also university schooled, my experience is that now, almost 50, I think that what I learned on the farm, all the things that I learned on the farm, was much more valuable than the things that public schools indoctrinate children with. And I think it's our responsibility as parents, if we're going to have kids, to raise our kids and not hand them over to the state. I don't think we should do that. If you're worried about socialization and things like that, I mean, um, we've got plenty of outlets for that. And in a farming community, you know, most of those young people want to experience the city. I've got a cousin that's deathly afraid of the city, like literally goes into like an anxiety shock just thinking about coming to Oklahoma, because she's been down in the southeast part of Oklahoma her whole life, and it's not moving real fast. The closest thing she gets to the city is what we call town. It's in town, right? And there's not much there. But kids that want to experience the city and things like that, I'm not saying that's bad, but I mean, there's plenty of socialization in the schools. I don't think public schools where you want to really let your kid get, you know, socialized. That's my opinion, because I've been public schooled, and having been homeschooled, I definitely believe that the values and the education that I got has been more helpful than the socialization in public schools and being fed evolution. You know, I think even whenever it comes to history, like we're not even given full history um, in our history books. When we talk about America, um, we it's like I was saying, we don't put the embarrassing things in there. Um, in our history books, whenever we learn about, like earlier we were talking about slaves, you know, they're not telling us that it was black slave owners that were trading their black slaves to Europeans for, you know, guns and silk and whatever. You know what I mean? Like they don't tell you that, right? But they will paint this picture with this religious narrative that sounds like Europeans went into Africa and just enslaved everybody, and then brought them over here and kept them enslaved. And I'm not saying that any of that's good. It doesn't matter what color you are. Enslaving somebody is just bad. And when we look at Scripture, typically slaves in that day, they were working off a debt. Somebody helped you financially, kind of like the bank. They helped you financially, and now you're working off the debt you owe, right? So, like for the bank, you've got to work for and I'm not saying in the Roman and Greek society there weren't, you know, slaves that were. I mean, I can't imagine what a 10 or 12-year-old kid had to go through being a slave for a Greek mayor or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's got to be a horrible experience. But the history books don't talk about that. They don't talk about those things. They want to give you this basic, and like I said, Oklahoma's 49, and how we don't take education serious. They're giving you just sort of a basic understanding of things that aren't even true, right? Controlling the narrative whenever it comes to history. When I was in college and I did biology, I thought that was cool. I thought it was really cool. And every time I looked at something, whether it was in the bones or saliva or the tissue of an animal, all that stuff, all I could see was God. You know what I mean? And so it's I think it's more important to teach our children what the scriptures say. And insofar as, you know, basic mathematics and all of those kind of things that come in handy, if they want to pursue something greater, that's wonderful. You know, help them out with that. But someone who has been public schooled, also homeschooled, my experience is that homeschool is a much better outlet. So that's all I got, man. I love you. All right, damn.